In August 1978, Olympic Airways Flight 411 sped down the runway when one of its engines exploded. The plane had already reached takeoff speed, so turning back wasn't an option. With one engine out, it struggled to climb and risked stalling. Heading straight for Kallithea at a dangerously low altitude, the pilot had to make a quick decision. What he did next shocked everyone. This is the story of Olympic Airways Flight 411 and how a captain's daring decision saved 418 lives. It was a blazing hot summer day on August 9, 1978, when 400 passengers, mostly Americans who had been vacationing in Greece, prepared to board a massive Boeing 747. Operated by Greece's national carrier, Olympic Airways, the flight was designated as Flight 411 and was scheduled to depart at 2 p.m. from Athens Ellinikon International Airport, heading to JFK International Airport in New York. The aircraft, a Boeing 747-200, was a common sight in many airlines' fleets at the time. Olympic Airways had acquired this particular plane in 1973 to handle its prime routes, including the non-stop flights between Athens and New York. The 747 was known for its size and capacity, making it perfect for carrying large numbers of passengers at lower per-seat costs. However, the jet wasn't without its issues. It was powered by Pratt & Whitney JT9D turbofan engines, which were developed quickly and had some flaws. These engines needed careful maintenance to run smoothly, and there had been previous incidents, including one with American Airlines, where an engine exploded shortly after takeoff due to overheating. Despite these challenges, the Boeing 747 remained a popular aircraft, and the 400 passengers had no qualms about boarding. They were joined by 18 crew members, including the captain, Sifis Megadis, a seasoned pilot with 32 years of experience with Olympic Airways. His first officer, Konstantinos Fardos, was also highly experienced and a close friend of the captain. After thorough pre-flight checks, the crew cleared the plane for takeoff. The weather was clear, but extremely hot, with temperatures around 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which would soon play a crucial role in the flight. At just after 2 p.m., the Boeing 747 began its taxi down runway 33R. The pilots noticed the aircraft felt a bit sluggish, but they pressed on, thinking it wasn't unusual. However, just before liftoff, a loud explosion shook the cabin. Engine number 3 had catastrophically failed due to overheating. But by then, the plane had already passed the point of no return, and there was no option to abort the takeoff. The aircraft had to climb with one less engine. Inside the cabin, a flight attendant received an urgent message from a colleague in the back. The inboard engine on the right side had blown up. As they braced for the worst, air traffic controllers watched in shock as Flight 411 struggled to gain altitude, leaving debris scattered across the runway. In the cockpit, Captain Megadis fought to keep the plane in the air. Unfortunately, engine number 2 was also underperforming, having recently undergone maintenance. To make matters worse, just after liftoff, a water flow warning alarmed the flight deck. The crew mistakenly interpreted this as a water runout issue and decided to turn off the water pump switch, further reducing the plane's ability to climb. Despite these obstacles, the aircraft managed to stay airborne, but it was a struggle to gain the necessary airspeed and altitude. Captain Megadis made a bold decision to retract the landing gear at just 35 feet above the ground against standard procedures. This move temporarily increased drag, a risky action that could have brought the plane down. However, the captain had no other choice, as a hill stood directly in their path. Relying on his extensive experience, Captain Megadis managed to lift the landing gear, and the plane gained some altitude. However, the hill was just a mile away. The captain pulled the nose up, sacrificing airspeed to clear the obstacle. The Boeing 747 barely made it over the hill, with just 9 feet to spare, but the danger was far from over. The climb to avoid the hill cost the plane precious airspeed, which was essential for staying aloft. The captain had to lower the nose to pick up speed or risk the plane stalling and falling from the sky. He decided to trade 50 feet of altitude for 6 knots of airspeed, barely enough to keep the aircraft from stalling. Now flying just 200 feet above Kallithea, a densely populated part of Athens, the Boeing 747 was in a perilous situation. With over 100,000 residents below, a crash would have been catastrophic. The plane passed dangerously close to the Athens Tower, the tallest building in Greece, barely missing the television antennas on the tallest buildings. Flight attendants could even see the shocked faces of people in nearby buildings as the massive jet flew by. The crew, barely keeping the plane airborne, had to maintain a level altitude below 200 feet at a speed of 160 knots, unable to turn. Captain Megadis focused on getting the plane out of the city and into an unpopulated area, minimizing the potential loss of life if they crashed. A translated recording later revealed that the captain thought it was all over for everyone on board. Meanwhile, in the cabin, passengers remained unaware of the danger. Some even thought they were on a sightseeing tour and began taking pictures. But the plane was now headed straight for Mount Egaleo, just a few hundred feet ahead. The crew knew they couldn't clear the mountain, but luck was on their side. The flight engineer optimized the remaining engines, giving them a bit more power, while a southwest breeze helped lift the plane. As the plane slowly gained altitude and airspeed, the ground continued to rise beneath them. The captain realized they couldn't clear the mountain at their current speed, but had just enough to make a banked turn without stalling. He turned the plane out to sea and waited as the airspeed increased. When the aircraft reached 300 feet, the captain, now more confident, retracted the flaps slightly. This allowed the plane to climb to 1,500 feet, where the captain began dumping fuel to lighten the load. With the plane now lighter, it safely climbed and headed back to Ellinikon International Airport. Against all odds, Flight 411 landed safely at the airport, with no injuries reported. Communication with air traffic control had been limited, and those in the tower were relieved to see the plane return in one piece. It wasn't until later that Captain Megadis realized he had narrowly averted one of the worst air disasters in history. The return of the aircraft was met with applause on the ground, and the captain was greeted by his two proud but shaken daughters. The Greek National Air Safety Board, which investigates aviation incidents, wasn't established until 2004, so the incident was reviewed by Boeing. Their report found no malfunction in the airframe or engines that caused the performance issues. Instead, they blamed the shutdown of the water injection pumps, which led to a decrease in thrust. However, newspapers reported that Engine 3 exploded due to overheating, and when investigators reviewed the flight data, they were astonished at how Captain Megadis had kept the plane airborne. Despite the challenges, the consequences were avoided thanks to Captain Megadis' quick thinking. He could have followed the checklist and kept the landing gear extended, but he trusted his instincts and experience. His decision saved the lives of nearly 500 people on board and potentially thousands on the ground. Incredibly, the same flight crew flew the passengers to New York later that evening on a replacement 747. The affected aircraft remained in service until 1985 before being retired in 1997. Captain Megadis was so proud of his accomplishment that he kept a copy of the flight data recorder as proof of the incredible story. In a 1994 interview, Megadis said, "Those of us who survived that day are stowaways in life." The story of Olympic Airways Flight 411 is a powerful reminder of the importance of trusting one's instincts in critical moments. Captain Megadis could have followed the rules, but his quick thinking and experience saved hundreds of lives. The passengers and crew of Flight 411 were fortunate to have such a skilled pilot at the controls that day.